Hello everyone, my name is Amber. Welcome to my channel, Amber Reads Romance. Today I'm going to be going over my weekly wrap-up for all the books that I read from May 12th through May 18th. Honestly, I didn't read as much this week. It was kind of tough with a couple books that were taking a little longer for me. But I read, I believe, 6 books. So hopefully this will be a quicker wrap up than my usual, but I do have to rant about one. So who knows, I may still talk a long time on that. So let's go ahead and dive into my weekly reads. Okay, so the first book that I read is actually the final book that I read for the Mafia romance Readathon. I do have a vlog for that. I will try to link that down below or put it up in the cards. So if you're interested, you can check out my vlog with a lot more info on each of the books that I read. I had a really great time as always. But this was The Darkest Temptation by Danielle Lowry. And this is the 3rd book in the Maid series. I actually bought this on Audible because I think it was on sale at the time. It was a pretty good deal. And I'm so glad that I did because this audiobook honestly made this book for me. Like, it was amazing. The narrators were phenomenal. It was duet narration. And in this book, we have our heroine, Mila, and she is 19, just turning 20. She's pretty sheltered, lives a pretty privileged life in America, but her dad is always doing business over in Russia and Moscow and everything, and so he hasn't come back in time like he usually does. He's being pretty vague about things, and so she wants to know what's really going on and what he's up to, and so she actually just flies out there. She does kind of have this Russian bodyguard too, that she kind of sneaks out on him, goes to Moscow, and shows up at like where her dad has like a house there and everything. And the people that live there, like the servants, they thought that she was dead, and they didn't know that she had been alive. She had like this famous Russian opera singers her mother, and I guess everybody hated her mother, that she was like evil. So she's finding out all this crazy stuff. She doesn't really have anywhere to go. Her dad's not there. And she ends up putting herself in the path of one of her father's enemies because, lo and behold, her father is part of the Bratva. He was kind of ran Moscow, I believe, previously. But now this guy that she runs into is running Moscow, and he hates her father for reasons. And so he kind of doesn't have to do much. He kind of just slightly woos her. She's pretty much throwing herself at him. She's totally interested. His name is Ronan. And he's like, they're kind of wooing a little bit. But eventually he ends up kind of taking her. So this is a captor-captive romance. He takes her out to his place that's like in the middle of nowhere. Like, if she got outside, there's still armed guards outside. And she wouldn't be able to get there for like the weather, and it's hours away from anywhere. So she's basically his captive. And so it was really interesting because Mila was like very naive and sheltered and kind of clueless. And so she goes through an interesting character arc in this. They're really sexually attracted to each other, and then you get this kind of crazy dynamic, and her learning out about like she has this whole other family because she was kind of like the baby from his affair with this like Russian opera singer. And so she basically, she's going to be used as collateral, and he wants the father to like turn himself over for her. And she's feeling guilty because she's finding out really horrible things about her father, but she like still loved her father and doesn't want him to die. And so it's this kind of weird thing, like how can it work? The reason I loved this audiobook so much was because he was a Russian character. We got a Russian accent, and he speaks Russian, and it's super hot. I think the female narrator did it really well too, because she would speak Russian at certain times and like French. And I don't know. I think the audiobook was so well done. So So I absolutely love this. It was a wild ride, and I gave it 5 stars and then 3.5 chilies. If you are interested, I would highly recommend getting the audiobook if you love that. Okay, so the next book that I read was, again, I have been doing my Rina Kent journey. I'm reading her backlist in her reading order. So the next book that I needed to get to was Empire of Desire. This is the first book in the Empire series. I'm not even going into that series after this one, though, because she has a specific rating order. So we'll see where I go to next. I will be vlogging these, but I only read this book this week. So I think I might have like 3 books in the next vlog that I'm going to do. But this one, I was interested in Nate's romance because he was introduced in like the previous duet that I read. And he's like a very ambitious, powerful attorney. And he runs his own, like him and his partner run their own law firm. And the character that like Sebastian or whatever from a previous book that I read, that's his nephew and everything. So I really liked Nate's character. He seemed very interesting. So this was going to be his romance, but it's with his best friend and colleague's daughter, Gwen. This didn't really work for me. I think this may have been the worst Rina Kent book that I've read so far. It's not horrible. I think a lot of people do like it. It just didn't really work for me. And a lot of that has to do with Gwen. She has been pining. It's like an unrequited love kind of thing. She has basically been pining after her dad's best friend for years, like since she was 14 years old. And like at 18, she finally like, it's her birthday and she like makes the move and kisses him. And he totally like spurns her and just lets her know like, no, that's never gonna happen. And he kind of like distances himself from her so that he's never around her. And so she's been pining after him. She is like very eccentric and has all these weird things. You know, she says her brain is messed up. She only has half a brain. Like, I don't even get that, but whatever. But I always have a hard time with a heroine that's pining for the guy. And like, he does nothing but turn her down. It makes him come off so pathetic. And so even when you know this guy is interested in her, it like just comes off ick to me. Like, so what ends up happening is her father gets in a really bad car accident and he is in a coma. But she's not old enough where things are going to be left to her, like when she's 21, and they need to protect their business and the house and everything because his stepmother and him have been battling for years, and he basically made it so she couldn't get anything. But with him in a coma, she was like going to come after them and all that stuff for the money. So Nate decides to do a marriage of convenience just on paper where him and Gwen get married so that she can sign over to him and he can protect the company, the house, everything, and all the assets. So that's kind of what we got, this dad's best friend, marriage of convenience, age gap, all of that. The thing is that he was attracted to her. He's kind of wanted her ever since she kissed him, but he was very cold to her. So even when he's being cold to her and she'll throw herself at him, and it just came off, I just didn't like it. Also, I just didn't really feel their chemistry. It was very spicy. There was some great stuff. There was snowballing in this, which I've been looking for more snowballing, and so I can make a video. So I was happy that I got another book with that. But I don't know. I just didn't fully work for me. And then like she had her mother basically kind of like never knew who her mother was. And the baby was just kind of like left with Nate when he was like a teenager. So he's raised her on his own. They're very close, but he's very overprotective. I actually am really fascinated with her dad. So I would be interested in his romance. But, like the end when you find out who the mom is, it was just so over the top and unbelievable. And I just was kind of checked out. So, another thing that I have to complain about was the amount of times we had to deal with her vanilla obsession, like vanilla milkshake, vanilla scents. I have to put vanilla into all my food items. And the amount of times vanilla is like brought up in this book, it was like as like a personality trait and like something to make her quirky and like it just fucking irritated me. Stop with the vanilla already. Anyways, so I didn't love this. It was missing a lot for me. Again, it's Rina Kent. It's very easy to read, a quick read, but it just didn't work. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars and 4 chilies because it does have a lot of good spice, dirty talk, snowballing, all of that. Okay, so the next book that I read was an arc. I did read The Torment of Two by K Webster. This is the 5th and final book in the Shameful Secrets series. And this is going to be Gemma Park's romance. She is the twin sister and like the last, basically like the last kid that we're doing here. And she is always kind of like been the good girl. She's followed the rules. Her parents are like really overprotective of her. So, and she's also a social media influencer and she's got a massive following. So she's very successful in that. But she has this thing where she feels like people think she's fake or, you know, she doesn't want to appear that way, but she's very successful. But she's excited for college because she really wants to get outside of her father's thumb and the overprotectiveness how they are with her. The problem also going on during all of this is she has a stalker. Somebody's leaving her some like weird messages on her through her social media, and so she'll just delete those or disregard those, but they are kind of giving her the creeps. So in her, she took a class that was supposed to be kind of like an easy class, and it ends up being like one of the most difficult ones there. And she has a couple run-ins with this guy, Two. His name is Tristan, but he goes by Two. That was like a nickname his adoptive parents gave him. And he, they kind of have some bad start to their run-ins. Then they're basically set up to be in the same, they have to do a project together. And it's worth like 75% of their grade. So they have to do a lot of outside classwork and a lot of work on it. And Two, for some reason, is completely rude to her, is like hateful, like hates her. So basically, Two was adopted by this, I love his dads. They're like adorable in this. But he discovered when he was younger, he was kind of looking in their closet to see if like they got Santa Claus gifts because he was trying to see if Santa Claus was real. And he found this box and it was like, you know, his adoption stuff, but also like a picture of like his room decorated for Gemma and this other girl that they were supposed to adopt, but it fell through. And so he always felt like second choice. And for some reason, it is a thin reason, but for some reason, like he always felt second choice and not good enough. He has a lot of depression and anxiety issues. So he's like actively in therapy, and he like hates Gemma because he feels like she was their choice. But the mom obviously didn't go through with the adoption. Gemma's mother was the one who ends up like she was the girlfriend of Callum, I think it was, in high school, and she ended up cheating on her boyfriend with his dad, and they get married and have kids together. So it's a crazy family. So they basically get put into this assignment together, and then they slowly, like, it's enemies to lovers, but not enemies too long, because Two realizes pretty quickly that there's a lot more to Gemma, and she really like is trying like to like figure out why he hates her, and like, hey, can we just start fresh? And so, you know, they basically start really bonding and they fall for each other. But she also has this stalker that isn't just leaving her messages on her, like, through social media anymore. Like, there's letters being left on her car with like flowers, and it's creepy. So he kind of needs to protect her too. So I really love this. It's really low angst, really low spice for K Webster, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was just a really quick, easy read. It didn't blow me away or anything, but I ended up giving it like 5 stars because I did enjoy it. I loved the mental health rep because Two is going to therapy, and he actually starts going to see Cate, who is like the therapist from one of the previous romances in the series. And I just love their dynamic, and to see him like actively going to therapy a couple of times a week. I just love that representation. And it's a great conclusion to the series. You get to see everybody, all the parks. So I really enjoyed it. I thought their romance was really sweet and easy. So the only thing is basically this stalker is the complicated thing in the third act. So I ended up giving it 5 stars and 2.5 chilies, and I had a good time. Okay, so the next book that I read was actually part of my 12 Recs from 12 Friends, and this is from Joanna at the Chameleon Reads, and she recommended 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake. And this is by Sarah MacLean. I was excited to get this because I've only read one Sarah MacLean and I really loved it. And so I need to read more. And I think this is actually her first book, which was pretty shocking because I think it's really good for a debut book. The one that I read is further on, so it was much better, but it's because she's, obviously evolved and gotten better with each book. But this had a really interesting setup. This is the first book in the Love by Numbers series. And this is, has Callie, and she is actually a spinster. She, hasn't gotten married. She's kind of just on the shelf, was kind of like a wallflower, and she just hasn't found anybody. But she kind of like wants to be able to do things that like she's never been able to do. She lives her life strictly by the rules as a lady, and she kind of decides to make a list of things that she wants to do that maybe women aren't allowed to do at that time, or is risky, or she wouldn't normally be able to do. The top thing on that was to kiss someone, and she has basically been pining for Gabriel St. John. He is the Marquess of Ralston, and she had an interaction with him in a garden one night, and it wasn't like anything crazy, but she really was fascinated by him, and he's like the typical rake, and so she has been like kind of watching him for like the last 10 years, has crushed on him, and so she decides she's gonna proposition him. She literally shows up to his house in the night to kind of proposition him to do this kiss. And the guy, like the butler, thinks it's like one of his ladies, his mistresses. So he literally takes her up to his room, which is like a no. And so she's very like flustered. But she does end up bringing up this idea, and he agrees to do it, but he says he wants her help with his sister. So he just discovered he had this illegitimate sister, and he wants to help introduce her to society and help her, like, so he wants Callie to teach her like how to be, a lady, so that she can get introduced to the ton and hopefully be accepted. So Callie is going to help out his sister, and then he ends up kissing her that night. And so she was very thankful for it, but she was kind of embarrassed that she went for it. And she decides to start going through all these lists of things. Like she wants to do like fencing, go to like a pub, gamble, all these type of things. So he kind of gets drawn into her quest to do all these things on her list, and they start to kind of fall for each other. I always really love a reformed rake. And, she is a plus-sized spinster. One thing I will complain about is I don't like it when the covers don't show her as a plus size. It's like a skinny person. Like, no, show the plus-size woman. If you're going to write about a plus-size woman, we need her on the cover. That representation needs to be there. So that's like the only thing that like really annoyed me. There was also a wager that he ended up doing with a guy at like one night, because this guy's saying he could get her to be his wife and blah, blah. And he just thinks that she would never even give him the time of day. And so he made this wager, but then it kind of gets out of control later. So I'm not really a fan of the bet wager thing coming into play in like the third act conflict, because whenever that happens, it's the third act conflict is going to happen. This one was good. It just was going really slow for me. Like, it took me a few days to listen to the audiobook, so it was a little slow going. I wasn't like flying through it like I usually would. I did really like them. I liked both the characters. I think it was a decent book. It just, I didn't really like the third act, and then it was a little slow going. But other than that, I think it was a great debut book for this author, so I was impressed, and I definitely want to continue reading Sarah MacLean. So I gave this one 4 stars and 2.5 chilies. Okay, so now we're going to go to the book that I'm probably going to rant about. This was actually our buddy read. This is The Fabric of Our Souls by K.M. Moronova. This is the first book I read of this author, and it will probably be the last. I don't know if I really want to give them another try. It was tough. I don't want to say I completely write off the author, but okay, let's just go over what this is. So in this book, we have Wynn, and she has recently attempted suicide. She tried to kill herself. And she's like in the hospital, and her brother decides to kind of put her into this, it's supposed to be an unorthodox rehab facility, and so that she can go get therapy and do this. She's suffered from depression for a long time, and she just doesn't feel like, she feels worthless, and she wants to take her own life, and she doesn't feel like she can live. She has a bad heart, which she kind of brings up a little bit randomly. She kind of has a run-in. It was supposed to be, it looked like it was like this male nurse that came in to like check in on her, but he wasn't really a nurse. He was actually there as well, for reasons. And that was Liam. And so that was a weird interaction. And then she goes to the rehab, and she ends up being roomed with Liam. And you're kind of asking yourself, why would they have them roomed opposite sex together? That doesn't seem like a good fit, but this is supposed to be the unorthodox rehab. And this is where the book fell apart for me, which isn't that, it's pretty early on. Like, I pretty much kind of wanted to DNF it, but I pushed through and finished it for the buddy read. And I was irritated because this book did not take mental health seriously. It was romanticizing mental health issues, and like, no rehab or facility or asylum or anything that you would go to would do the things that this place does. Like, they're roomed with somebody, like, it could be the opposite sex, and it's supposed to help with their treatment. They're pairing them with somebody that could help them, but it doesn't even make sense for these two characters because it's just dumb. And then they let these people just have free reign all over the place, even though she had literally just tried to unalive herself. She should have been they need to be more watched. They need to be checked in on, better security, watching these, like, they literally have locks inside their doors so they can lock people out of their room. That is not safe for somebody that, the guy that she's with, Liam, he actually cuts himself. So that's not safe for him, and it's definitely not safe for her since she was very suicidal. So it just made no freaking sense. Then you have like this open, like, multiple stall shower thing for a shared shower for everybody. And in one scene, she literally goes in there and they're all fucking like in each of the stalls, and it's part of their therapy. Like, they encourage them to get sexual. In no way is that ever accurate. Like, if you are not even just like a rehabilitation for like mental illness, but for like rehab to get clean and sober, they don't even want you to get in a relationship or sexual for like the first year, because it's not good for your sobriety or for your mental health. Like, if you're suicidal and then you get in this relationship and it doesn't work, you could get it could be really bad. So that was like already pissing me off. Then this book didn't really know what it was. It was like he was kind of a bully, but then he was like also like gone for her, like obsessed with her, like, and then we have like his friend, which also falls in love with her, but he's not in it enough. So you're like, what's going on there? There's like literally no therapy happening in this book. Like you barely get it suggested. And it's like, that should be a heavy part of this book if you are doing like a book about mental health and mental illness. Like you should be that should be a big part of it. I think about this Stay With Me series. I freaking loved it. It's, deals with dark subject matter, but it's like, they're actually dealing with the therapy, and they combat like these big issues, but like, they're going to get sexual and do things, but it was like sneaking around. Like this, it was like all out in the open, and it just was unrealistic. Like it was so ridiculous. Then it's like there's people that were missing from 10 years ago or something, and now they're looking into their deaths, and there's some like weird guy around, and there's a reveal about what's going on, and it's just pretty dumb. The ending, the twist at the end was stupid and over the top and unbelievable. Like this book was all over the place. Like it was a chaotic mess. Like it was bad. Like, and the biggest thing was the mental health and like the way it was romanticized. Like, no. Also, the writing was not great. Like the lines that this guy says, like, are so cheesy. No guy would ever say these types of things. It felt very like Wattpad, kind of thing. I don't know. I just cringed. It was not good. So I ended up giving this one 2. I'm thinking 2 or 2.5 stars. Not sure. I'm probably going to put it at a 2 on Goodreads. But yeah. And I think I gave it like 2.5 chilies because I didn't even care. Like I had no connection to these characters or their romance. So unfortunately, our buddy read wasn't really great this month. And we are actually taking a break for the summer because everybody's schedules are just a little chaotic this summer. So the next time that it's going to be on my channel, it's going to be after the summer, so we should be back in September to do our buddy reads again. So I do apologize for that. If any of you would be willing, I was almost thinking of doing just a buddy read with some of my subscribers. Like we could pick a book and just read it together, but I don't know. I don't think I have enough subscribers or followers to do that yet. So maybe someday in the future, that's something we could do. But we will be back in September on that one. Okay, so the last book that I read was just an arc. I saw Kate Wells post that she had a couple arcs available still, and I just jumped on and I got it. So this book is After the Shut Up Ring. This is by Kate Wells, and I believe this is coming out on the 24th. And I found this one really interesting. I thought it was an interesting concept. If you've heard of like the shut up ring, it's kind of like a ring the guy gives you to shut you up because you want to get married, or like he's kind of forced into this marriage. And basically the book kind of starts off at this woman, Angie's wedding. She has been with this boyfriend for like 8 years. They have 2 daughters together, and, they basically got together, I think when she was like 15, 16, and they had like teenage pregnancies. So they've been together for 8 years, and this guy is a total scumbag. But she's got these beautiful daughters that she adores. And during this wedding, for the vows, he basically roasts her. He says all these horrible things about her body, about basically kind of being forced into this. Like he's being forced to do this marriage. So here I am, like he's so cruel in these vows. And she's like looking around. Her daughters are watching this, and this guy's like filming her, and you could just imagine it, like this poor woman being like embarrassed online. And so she's like horrified. She's really beaten down, and that's what's really hard to read in this book, because she really does not stand up for herself ever, and she takes his abuse. This guy is gaslighted her and brought down her like self-esteem, and she has like no self-worth and just lets him treat her like crap. So that is really hard to read. But she sees her daughters, and she doesn't want them to see her accept that kind of behavior and accept that kind of abuse. And so she basically says no when it comes to her vows. So he kind of loses it and is all pissed off, even though he wanted nothing to do with this marriage. He felt like he was forced into it. But he's a little whiny bitch, so that's how he reacts. Her best friend's brother is like, when this happened, he like stood up, like ready to get in there and get involved. And she actually lives with his mom because she really had nowhere to go, and they were really a big part of her life. She's been friends with his little sister since they were little kids. And this guy has actually been pining for her for years, but he didn't think it was good with him being just a little bit older. Maybe I think it's like a couple of years. It's not that big of a difference. But when they were younger, it felt different. But since she ended up, sorry, my cat's playing out here. But since she ended up being with this guy and getting pregnant in high school, you know, he missed his chance and he's been waiting, but she stayed with this asshole for like 8 years. So now it's his chance and he doesn't want to lose this opportunity. So he's been like asking her out. And even though she had a crush on him when she was younger, she's like scared to do it because she's kind of hiding something that she's very insecure and feels a lot of doubt about. And that is that she has an STD. Her boyfriend had cheated on her, and during her second pregnancy, a test came back and she realized that she had an STD, and it was from him cheating on her. So yet another thing that this horrible bastard did. And so she, you know, has to be careful. She has to take medication. She could have flare-ups. You have to be very, you know, be careful sexually, and you have to disclose that to your sexual partners. And she's so scared to tell him that, even though Brandon, this hero, is like a cinnamon roll hero. He is so sweet. He wants to be there for her. But she's just so scared. She's been beaten down for years that she doesn't really speak her mind about things. She holds things in. So they kind of have a tough, angsty go of it of when they're first trying to start to date. And then when she tells him the truth and how is he going to respond, she's nervous. And so a lot of the time, this book, what was really hard is watching this poor woman deal with the ex and the way he treats their daughters and the abuse she dealt with from him and still continues to deal with without speaking her mind and telling him to fuck off. That's what was really hard about this book and hard to read. So that part was just kind of took off a star for me. Because it was just brutal. Like and even at the end, you really want her to push more and give him more of an FU than what she does. So that kind of was tough, but I loved the romance. I loved the talking about the STDs and like how they worked through this, and just, I don't know. I just loved Brandon. So I actually really enjoyed this, even though it was tough watching her be so beat down and be with such an asshole, because a lot that happens to a lot of women. It's realistic. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars and 2 chilies. So I definitely enjoyed it. Okay, so those are all the books that I read this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to my channel. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite book was from the Mafia Romance Readathon or just from this week. I don't know if you guys are participating in that, but you should try it next year if you haven't. I had a great time as always. But thank you so much. Like the video, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.